What alien queens really see in human soldiers. Chapter 1. The Summons. Hellion Gate was the kind of outpost assigned to soldiers who needed a period of decompression, which was military code for please stop generating incident reports. Lieutenant Richard Saber had accepted the posting without complaint. After a decade of campaigns, the quiet suited him. The station hummed, the rift glowed, and no one expected him to do anything more demanding than recalibrate a sensor array twice a week, which was why the diplomatic alert klaxon felt like a personal attack. Saber turned from the observation deck as Commander Halliday strode in, fastening the last clasp of his uniform with the grim determination of a man who had been dragged out of a perfectly good sleep cycle. "Lieutenant," Halliday said, "we've received a direct transmission from the Dominion of Crowns." Saber blinked. "To us?" "Yes," Halliday said. "To us. Specifically addressed to this outpost." Saber considered this. Hellion Gate was not the sort of place anyone addressed anything to. Even supply ships sometimes forgot it existed. "Is it a threat?" Saber asked. "No," Halliday said. "It's a summons." Saber waited. Halliday cleared his throat. "For you." Saber stared. "Me?" "Yes." "Why?" Halliday gave him a look that suggested he'd asked the same question several times already and had not enjoyed any of the answers. "Queen Vexera herself has requested your presence." Saber opened his mouth, closed it, then settled on, "I've never met her." "I'm aware. I've never met anyone from the Dominion." "Yes." "I've never even been near Dominion space." Halliday sighed. "Lieutenant, I assure you we are all equally confused." He handed Saber a datapad. The message glowed with the Dominion's ceremonial script, ornate enough to make Saber's eyes hurt. It bore the Queen's personal seal. "She wants me transported immediately," Saber said. Halliday nodded. "We can refuse." Saber raised an eyebrow. "And provoke the Dominion?" "They're already provoked," Halliday said. "This message proves it." Saber exhaled. "What are my orders?" "Prepare for transport," Halliday said, "and try not to say anything that could start a war." Saber nodded. "I'll do my best." "That," Halliday muttered, "is what worries me." The Dominion courier arrived within the hour, sleek, silver, and so polished it made Hellion Gate look like a scrapyard. A single envoy waited at the ramp, tall and austere, its face hidden behind a reflective mask. "Lieutenant Richard Saber," the envoy said, voice filtered through metallic resonance. "Her Majesty awaits." Saber stepped forward, boots echoing against the deck. He paused only once, glancing back at the outpost, the flickering lights, the dented bulkheads, the comforting mediocrity of it all. Halliday gave him a stiff nod. "Try not to get adopted." Saber frowned. "Why would—" "Just go," Halliday said. The hatch sealed behind him. The courier lifted away from Hellion Gate without a sound, carrying him toward a queen he had never met, for reasons no one could explain. Hours later, the galaxy would learn that after meeting Saber, Queen Vexera had declared an immediate ceasefire with Earth. A decision that would fracture alliances, ignite suspicion, and place Lieutenant Richard Saber at the center of a crisis he had never asked for. A crisis that began the moment he stepped aboard the ship. Chapter 2. The Pattern. The United Systems Intelligence Directorate was buried so deep beneath the Capitol spire that Richard Saber suspected it had been designed by someone who disliked sunlight on principle. The walls were matte gray, the lighting was aggressively functional, and the air carried the faint scent of recycled caution. Saber sat in a secure briefing chamber, hands folded, posture straight. He had been in interrogation rooms before, but this one had the distinct atmosphere of people preparing to blame him for something they didn't understand. Director Conroy entered with the calm precision of a man who alphabetized his anxieties. He carried a data pad and the expression of someone who had not slept since the ceasefire announcement. "Lieutenant Saber," Conroy said, taking the seat opposite him. "Thank you for coming." Saber nodded. "I wasn't given much of a choice." Conroy allowed the faintest flicker of acknowledgement. "No, you were not." He activated the data pad. A holographic display flickered to life between them. 5 faces, 5 human soldiers, each with a service record as unremarkable as Saber's was decorated. "These individuals," Conroy said, "experienced encounters similar to yours." Saber studied the faces. A medic, a marine, a reconnaissance officer, a diplomatic escort. None looked like the type to destabilize galactic politics. Then again, neither did he. Conroy continued, "After brief contact with alien queens, each of these soldiers became the catalyst for sudden political shifts. Ceasefires, policy reversals, unexpected concessions." Saber raised an eyebrow. "And no one thought to mention this before now?" "We believed each incident was isolated," Conroy said. "A coincidence." Saber nodded slowly. "And now?" Conroy tapped the display. The hologram shifted to a timeline of events. 5 encounters, 5 queens, 5 abrupt changes in interstellar policy. "Now," Conroy said, "we believe it is a pattern." The report was classified at the highest level. It leaked within 48 hours. News networks erupted with headlines. "Alien queens target human soldiers. Unexplained pattern of political influence. Is humanity a threat or a tool?" Saber watched the coverage from his quarters, jaw tightening as commentators speculated about his mysterious influence and possible telepathic compatibility. One anchor suggested Saber might be the most dangerous man in the galaxy. Saber turned off the screen. "I can't even keep a houseplant alive," he muttered. Commander Halliday stood in the doorway, arms folded. "You're famous." "Unwillingly," Saber said. "That's the best kind," Halliday replied. "Less pressure to perform." Saber gave him a look. "Sir, I didn't do anything." "No one thinks you did," Halliday said. "That's what makes everyone nervous." Under mounting pressure, the 5 monarchies convened a rare joint summit. Saber watched the encrypted feed from a secure observation room, flanked by analysts who whispered theories like nervous schoolchildren. Chapter 3. The Summit. The joint summit of the 5 monarchies was the kind of event historians would later describe as unprecedented, tense, and deeply ill-advised. Richard Saber watched it unfold from a secure observation room buried beneath the Capitol spire, flanked by Commander Halliday and a handful of intelligence officers who looked like they'd aged a decade in the last week. The summit was broadcast only to select personnel. The public would get a sanitized version later, something with fewer implications of galactic collapse. 5 queens appeared as holographic projections around a circular dais aboard the Celestial Forum, a neutral station floating in the starless void between their territories. The Forum had been built for unity. It was now mostly used for arbitration and quiet threats. Saber leaned back in his chair. "They look calm." Halliday snorted. "They're monarchs. They're trained to look calm while their empires catch fire." "Comforting." "Wasn't meant to be." Queen Vexara spoke first, her voice measured and regal. "We are gathered to address concerns regarding our recent decisions involving human soldiers." Queen Threxia of the matriarchy responded with the sharpness of someone who had not slept in several days. "Our governments believe we have acted irrationally." Queen Lyra of the Luminous Steppe added, "They believe we have been influenced." Saber raised an eyebrow. "Influenced by what?" Halliday gave him a look. "Don't say it." "I wasn't going to." "You were thinking it." Saber shrugged. "Thinking isn't illegal." Yet. Queen Varela of the Concorde stepped forward, her expression tight. When I met the human medic assigned to my relief mission, she said, my thoughts aligned, the noise quieted. Queen Threxia nodded reluctantly. The presence of the human prisoner during interrogation brought clarity. The Carthos Hive Queen's synthesized voice translated her layered harmonics. The human mind resonates. It balances. The observation room fell silent. One analyst whispered, So, they're saying humans are like emotional stabilizers? Halliday pinched the bridge of his nose. Please don't phrase it like that. Saber crossed his arms. I'm starting to feel underqualified for whatever this is. You and the rest of the galaxy, Halliday muttered. Queen Vexara lifted her chin. We are not drawn to humans, she said. We are stabilized by them. The statement hit the room like a dropped weapon. The Queen's governments erupted immediately. Accusations, denials, demands for explanations. The summit dissolved into diplomatic chaos. Saber watched the feed flicker as the session was abruptly cut. Well, he said, that went well. Halliday gave him a flat look. Lieutenant, that was the political equivalent of a reactor breach. On the bright side, Saber said, at least no one blamed me directly. Give it time. Within hours, internal communications leaked across the galaxy. Civilian governments questioned their rulers' fitness. Military councils demanded answers. Opposition factions called for investigations, reforms, or abdications. The satire sharpened quietly. A galaxy built on the myth of sovereign infallibility now confronted the possibility that its rulers were biologically dependent on the presence of human soldiers. Not romantically, not emotionally, neurologically, and no one knew why. Halliday returned later with a datapad and a grim expression. You're mentioned in the summit transcript, he said. Saber sighed. Of course I am. They're calling you the catalyst. Saber rubbed his temples. I didn't do anything. That, Halliday said, is exactly what terrifies them. Saber looked out the viewport, watching the capital lights flicker like distant stars. What happens now? He asked. Halliday hesitated. Earth wants answers, the Dominion wants access, and the other monarchies, they want to know why you exist. Saber exhaled slowly. Great. I've become a scientific anomaly with a pulse. Welcome to the center of the galaxy, Halliday said. Saber didn't respond. He wasn't sure he could. Somewhere in the Dominion, Queen Vexara stood before her council, refusing to elaborate on her statement. Except for one phrase, repeated with unwavering certainty, the human brings me balance. And Richard Saber had the sinking feeling that whatever was happening, it was only beginning. Chapter 4. The Science. The Joint Scientific Task Force operated out of a subterranean complex so deep beneath the Capitol spire that Richard Saber suspected it had been designed by someone who distrusted fresh air. The corridors were narrow, the lighting clinical, and the scientists moved with the brisk, caffeinated urgency of people who had not slept since the summit. Saber stood behind a transparent barrier in an observation chamber, feeling like an exhibit in a museum no one had asked to visit. Dr. Gail Pritchard, lead neurologist, addressed the assembled coalition of human and alien researchers. She had the posture of someone who had been holding the galaxy together with sheer willpower. We have analyzed the neurological scans of all 5 soldiers involved in the Queen incidents, she said. The results are consistent. She activated a holographic display. 5 brain scans appeared, each marked with faint blue patterns. This, she continued, is the signature. Saber leaned toward Commander Halliday. Is that good? Halliday whispered back. If it were good, they wouldn't look like they're about to declare a state of emergency. A Dominion biologist stepped forward, crystalline skin refracting the light. This pattern is not a typical human stress response, he said. It is stabilized. A Threxian empathic specialist emitted a low harmonic tone, the equivalent of a frown. "Your soldiers," she said, "carry a resonance, a mental stillness under pressure. It is rare among our species. It was once common among our monarchs." Saber blinked. "So we're calming?" Halliday elbowed him. "Let the experts talk." Dr. Pritchard continued. "Monarchic species once had co-regents who shared the cognitive burden of leadership. Their minds balanced the Queen's empathic field." "And now?" an analyst asked. The Tyrellian cognitive theorist answered, "Now the trait has vanished. Their queens rule alone. Their minds bear the full weight of governance." The Threxian specialist added, "Under strain, their cognitive fields become turbulent." Saber raised a hand slightly. "Just to clarify, I'm not doing anything on purpose." "We know," Pritchard said without looking at him. "That's part of the problem." The room erupted into debate. "If this becomes public," the Dominion biologist said, "our governments will panic." "They already have," Pritchard replied. The Tyrellian theorist added, "Some will demand access to human soldiers. Others will forbid it." The Threxian specialist's harmonics deepened. "And some will attempt to replicate the trait artificially." Saber muttered, "That sounds safe." Halliday whispered, "Please stop talking." After hours of argument, the task force drafted a preliminary conclusion. Human soldiers possess a rare neurological pattern that stabilizes monarchic cognitive fields. The queens are not influenced, they are balanced, and they become dependent. The conclusion was classified immediately. Saber left the observation chamber, feeling the weight of it settle across his shoulders like armor he had never asked to wear. Halliday caught up to him in the corridor. "Well?" Halliday asked. Saber shook his head. "They think we're something they lost." Halliday's expression darkened. "That makes you valuable." Saber exhaled. "Or vulnerable." Halliday didn't argue. Somewhere in the Dominion, Queen Vexara stood before her council, refusing to explain her decision. Except for one phrase, repeated with unwavering certainty, "The human brings me balance." And Richard Saber had the sinking feeling that the galaxy was about to prove her right. Chapter 5. The Escalation. The ceasefire had been in effect for exactly 12 days, when everything went sideways. Richard Saber was in a secure briefing room, trying to drink coffee that tasted like it had been filtered through a sock, when Director Conroy entered with the expression of a man who had just discovered a new category of disaster. "A human soldier has been taken," Conroy said. Saber set down the mug. "Taken as in transferred?" "Taken as in abducted," Conroy replied. "By the Tyrellian Concord." Saber blinked. "They abducted a communications technician." "Yes." "Why?" Conroy stared at him. "Lieutenant, if we knew why, we wouldn't be having this conversation." Commander Halliday stepped in behind him, arms folded. "They left a message." Conroy handed Saber a datapad. The message was short, encrypted, and deeply unhelpful. "He is safe. He is necessary. Do not interfere." Saber exhaled. "Well, that's reassuring." Halliday muttered, "In the same way a fire alarm is reassuring." The abduction triggered a chain reaction. Within 48 hours, a Carthos Hive patrol intercepted a human medical transport and attempted to scan for stabilizing minds. A Threxian strike team infiltrated a research station, searching for neurologically compatible individuals. The Luminous Step issued a formal request for voluntary human advisors, which Earth rejected with the diplomatic equivalent of a door slam. The Dominion of Crowns deployed envoys to every major human installation, insisting on cooperative access to Saber. Saber watched the reports scroll across the briefing room screen. "This is escalating," he said. Halliday gave him a look. "Lieutenant, this is what escalation looks like after it's had 3 cups of coffee and a nervous breakdown." Conroy added, "The galaxy believes human soldiers are stabilizing assets. They will act accordingly." Saber rubbed his temples. "I didn't do anything. I swear I didn't do anything." "That," Conroy said, "is precisely the problem. Earth issued an emergency directive. All human soldiers with the stabilizing signature were to be placed under protective watch. All diplomatic contact required armed escort. All monarchic requests for access were denied." Saber received 2 security officers who shadowed him everywhere. They were polite, professional, and clearly terrified of losing him. He tried to make conversation once. "So," Saber said, "do you 2 rotate shifts?" They stared at him like he'd asked them to disarm a bomb with their teeth. He stopped trying. 2 days later, the Dominion of Crowns made its own declaration. "Lieutenant Richard Saber is under Dominion protection. Any attempt to restrict his movement is a violation of interstellar law." Earth responded immediately, "Lieutenant Saber is a citizen of the United Systems. Any attempt to claim him will be considered an act of aggression." Saber stared at the diplomatic exchange. Halliday sighed. "Congratulations. You're now the galaxy's most politely contested object." "That's not comforting," Saber said. "It wasn't meant to be." That night, Saber sat alone in his secured quarters, the lights dimmed, the city above him quiet. He stared at the faint reflection of his own face in the window. A soldier who had survived battles, tribunals, and political storms, but never anything like this. His comm unit chimed. An encrypted channel. Dominion origin. Untraceable. Saber hesitated, then accepted. Queen Vexara appeared, not as a hologram, but as a direct visual feed. Her expression was composed, but her eyes held something he couldn't name. "Lieutenant Saber," she said softly, "you are in danger." Saber kept his voice steady. "From whom?" "From everyone," she replied. "From those who fear what you represent. From those who desire it. From those who do not understand it." Saber exhaled. "And you?" Vexara's gaze did not waver. "I seek only balance," she said. "And you bring it." Saber swallowed. "Why me?" "For the same reason the others were chosen," she said. "Because your mind is steady where ours are strained. Because your presence quiets what would otherwise fracture." She paused. "And because the galaxy will not allow you to remain unclaimed." Saber felt a cold certainty settle in his chest. "What do you want from me?" he asked. Vexara's voice softened. "To survive," she said, "and to understand what you are." The transmission ended. Saber sat in the darkness, the silence pressing in around him. He had never felt less like a soldier, and never more like a target. Epilogue. Necessary minds. The galaxy didn't change overnight. It didn't even change over the next month. But it shifted. The way a massive ship shifts when its engines fire, slowly at first, then with a momentum that can't be stopped. Richard Saber watched it happen from a modest office in the Capitol spire, where he had been assigned a non-operational advisory role, which was bureaucratic shorthand for "please stay where we can see you." He didn't mind. The coffee was better than Healy and Gates, and no one had tried to abduct him in at least 3 weeks. By current standards, that counted as stability. A soft chime sounded. A message appeared on his console, encrypted, Dominion origin, but this time routed through official channels. "Lieutenant Saber, the Accord is holding. Reforms have begun. Balance is possible. Vexara." Short. Formal. And for a queen who had once summoned him across the stars without explanation, almost warm. Saber leaned back in his chair. "Well," he said to the empty room, "that's something." He closed the message and looked out the window. The capital skyline shimmered in the late afternoon light, ships drifting between towers like slow-moving stars. Somewhere out there, monarchies were rewriting centuries-old traditions. Scientists were racing to replicate a neurological trait that was fading faster than anyone liked. Diplomats were arguing over definitions of voluntary service, with the enthusiasm of people who had never met a volunteer. And Saber? He was still trying to figure out how he'd become the galaxy's most politely contested biological anomaly. A knock sounded at the door. Halliday stepped in, holding 2 cups of coffee. "Thought you could use this?" Saber accepted one. "Thanks. Any new crises?" "Not today," Halliday said, "but it's early." Saber nodded. "I'll take the win." Halliday hesitated. "You ever think about what comes next?" Saber looked back out at the city, at the ships, the towers, the slow, steady pulse of a galaxy trying to learn balance the hard way. "Honestly," he said, "I'm just glad I'm not being summoned by another queen." Halliday smirked. "Give it time." Saber sighed. "That's what I'm afraid of." They stood in companionable silence, watching the sky shift from gold to blue. For the first time in a long while, Saber felt something like peace. Fragile, imperfect, but real. The galaxy wasn't balanced yet, but it was trying, and for now that was enough. The end. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you.